We are back, and we are joined now by Greg Stoker, U.S. veteran, anti-imperialist activist, and host of the Colonial Outcast podcast, which is a great show. Live with us, or we're recording this a few hours before the show. Live with me now, at least, from the Global Sumud Flotilla, if I'm saying that correctly, sailing to Gaza to break the siege and deliver humanitarian aid. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
I'm so glad to be able to speak with you from the flotilla. As I mentioned, you're on one of the, I guess, 24 boats that set sail on Sunday, on the flotilla, trying to get to Gaza to break the siege. But on the other hand, the Israeli government is saying that you're doing this for Instagram clout. So I'm hoping you're taking some cool pics for the timeline, buddy.
I am. The account Quentin Quarantino had a great video of me talking trash to the other journalists who are on like a really nice media boat, and I'm stuck on the vet boat that has like actual sails and rigging. And it's basically just a massive vacation where we have very limited rations and living space, and we're going to deal with a rogue state that has a history of massacring international humanitarian activists like the Mavi Marmara and the World Central Kitchen last year. But yeah, if it's for clout for sure.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, incredible bravery by all of you guys, and this flotilla movement keeps growing by the month. People who are trying to join and break the siege. How many folks are with you this time? I know that the ships have delegations from like over 40 countries or something like that.
Yeah, 44 different countries. There's a couple boats from the US delegation. Other countries only have one, but we wanted this to be a transnational effort of humanitarian relief to basically do what our governments collectively as an entire like world population are refusing to do. So yeah, we have had a couple of delays. It actually has gone off, growing up in the military a lot smoother than I thought it would. From a humanitarian, human rights activist perspective, I thought it was going to be cluster F than it was. Of course, we had a 24-hour weather stand down, and then we've, had to set up a rally point to collect other ships that were scattered in the storm. But we're doing the best with what we can because this is like a grassroots movement largely. And again, we don't have a military infrastructure. We don't have a tax base where we can, allocate funds to naval operations. So, yeah, there's going to be delays. It's going to take a minute to get there, but we're not going to be deterred through like psychological operations like Ben-Gvir saying that all of us, including Greta Thunberg, is going to go into terrorist level
Yes.
detention facilities in order to deter other activists for attempting the same thing again. And I would like to remind the minister that there is only one person in this conversation who's actually been convicted of terrorism, Itamar Ben-Gvir.
Good point. Good point. And that brings me to these quotes because it's insane. This broke yesterday. This is from the Jerusalem Post. The National Security Minister of Israel, Itamar Ben-Gvir, they presented a plan to the cabinet aimed at halting the largest flotilla ever planned to sail to Gaza, comprising 50 ships with activists from 44 countries. Ben-Gvir presented the plan in this meeting. Under the new suggested directive, all activists arrested in connection with the flotilla will be detained in Israel's Kenziot and Damon prisons, which are used to hold terrorists under stringent conditions typically reserved for security prisoners. The activists will be held in prolonged detention, unlike the previous practice of releasing detainees after brief overnight stays. Activists will be denied special privileges such as TV, radio, and specialized food in an effort to impose a clear message that supporting terrorism will not be allowed. So then also Ben-Gvir says they're going to be confiscating your ships and repurposing them under Israeli law. Now,
Yeah,
I'm not a
he
legal
says
expert, but what's their jurisdiction? You're in international waters. Let's start there.
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, honestly, Ben, I would love for you to turn these boats that we cobbled together within the past 2 months and use them as your new police force. Because personally, my boat doesn't have bow thrusters, so we can't even dock without port assistance. So please make
Hell
these the
yeah.
new top boats.
They should
Um,
replace the Israeli Navy or whatever their equivalent is with your guys' stuff. That's my tip for them too.
Yeah, well, see, Ben Gvir does say a lot of nonsense, but they are definitely concerned. Israel, doing a threat analysis for the Security Council for this Global Sumud Flotilla. It's easy to find via open source information that Israel has a very small navy, 49th, 50th largest or smallest, however you want to take that, in the world. They only have 60 vessels, 5 of which are submarines. Most of them, I would guess, are stationed or posted out in the Persian Gulf to do signal intelligence collection on Iranian assets in the region. Then they have like 6 to 8 like missile cruisers and then 45 patrol boats, some of which are in patrol detachments based out of the port of Eilat in the Red Sea. So they're not even part of this. So like their other naval assets are doing like patrols along the Lebanese and Syrian coast to interdict like weapons or whatever intelligence support going to Hezbollah. So it's like, how many ships and assets do they actually have allocated for this? So what they're hoping is they really don't want to be dealing with this flotilla right now. They're in a bad PR position as it is, as what happens to one who's enforcing famine and ethnic cleansing on an entire population, but they don't have any legal basis. So they are falling back on the old tropes of, this is terrorist. This is an act of terrorist. They're calling Greta Thunberg a terrorist. And I would just like to say that, if your state sees a 22-year-old activist as like one of its existential threats, it's not looking good for the longevity of the project. But they're hoping that this will fail. So they're hoping it will collapse in on itself. The entire project will implode before we get to the port of Tunis. That's not going to happen. So we're going to keep moving across the Mediterranean towards Palestinian territories. And in that, there's going to be a lot of psychological operations. So this is kind of like a taste of what we're going to get, these kind of threats. Then it's going to escalate to drones, like holding close orbits, so you can hear the buzzing all night around the flotilla. We're expecting them to pull tactics like they do with journalists in Gaza, where they get a ship's captain's phone number, start calling them, issuing threats. We can expect doxing, all the way up to having an Israeli Navy corvette parked off the flotilla, escorting us into an interdiction site. So, psychological operations are going to be a big part of this, and intimidation is going to be a big part of this, because they would like to divide and conquer, break the cohesion of the flotilla so they don't actually have to deal with it, because it's bad information operations all around.
Well, so how many boats are there actually, and how much larger is this flotilla compared to the previous efforts that we talk about, where we saw some of the different sabotage and psychological operations you described, but also there was a last month, I believe, there was acid delivered to one of the boats instead of drinking water. There was damage to the propeller prior to taking off. I mean, this is the Israeli. This is their tactics is written all over it.
Well, we've had more operational security. And look, with an operation this large, you can't really be completely secure. But we haven't encountered acid water or sabotaged propellers or bureaucratic sabotage. They definitely pressured the port authorities to make it so that they denied our insurance, pulled the flags, made it unable for us to launch bureaucratically. And now Isaac Herzog, the president of Israel, is ostensibly flying into Italy today, into Rome today, to meet with the Pope. But I think we assess that that's just a cover for him to add further bureaucratic pressure to the Italian government to deny the launch from the third group of the Sumud Flotilla that's going to launch out of the Italian peninsula. So yeah, they're trying bureaucratic, psychological, and then they'll try military. So we've seen through open source intelligence that they've massed a couple of electronic warfare and surveillance planes, C-130s and G550 like converted private jets that have like electronic warfare suites. So they might just try to like burn out all of our comms en route in order to stop the flotilla. I mean, they have a number of ways to do this, but again, it's all a violation of international law.
Of
So
course. And can you speak a little bit about? I know that the dock workers, was it in Genoa, the in Italy, um, have threatened to strike if they lose contact with the flotilla. That is my recollection of that correct? And also, what does that mean to have kind of labor solidarity from dock workers like this backing you?
I mean, it means a lot, but from my perspective, like it's kind of it's not unprecedented, you know. But my question is like, why wait? Just shut it down now. I mean, we're like witnessing the final solution and the annihilation of entire people.
Yep.
And it's kind of frustrating, I'll be honest, to see that people like only really care now that a bunch of like white Europeans are engaged, you know, on a flotilla. Sorry, other boats yelling at us. So yeah, but that's kind of like why we wanted to do a veteran boat, and that's why I kind of put this thing together last minute, because we wanted to use our protective status due to the like grotesque militarization of our society as veterans to kind of explain to people, or you know, to make it understandable that whatever violence we do overseas, whatever forms of repression that we enact on other people, are almost immediately used upon our own population. And
Right.
that's like because we have been desensitized to conflicts in the Middle East or West Asia for the past 20 years. It's just what happened over there. You know, the ill-fated and ill-termed global war on terror. It's kind of, I believe, made a lot of people think like, I know it's horrible, but like, what can I do? Or why should I care? It doesn't really affect me. And I think this is why, especially within the context of Israel and operating under the premise that, you know, fascism is on the rise here in the United States, it's so easy to draw a parallel between the Israeli Defense Force and intelligence services and our new extrajudicial Gestapo force, ICE. Because like, I think The Intercept just broke an article that ICE is now using graphite, you know, developed by the Israeli tech firm Paragon, that can
Yep.
basically just infiltrate your entire phone and blow up your contact list and messaging instantly. And now ICE has access to that. And we already know that ICE is basically keeping a database of, and tracking everybody who posts anything derogatory about them online. So if you're concerned about your own personal safety, we want to make the argument that in some ways, in some very real way, that Palestine is the front line of this struggle, because in the end, whatever our government is willing to do to Palestinians or allow to be done to Palestinians, they're also going to allow to be done to you.
Right. What Greg is referencing there is that ICE is the Trump administration did this deal with Paragon, the Israeli basically, you know, hacking service, and that ICE is going to be able to use it. This has been already used to target activists and journalists in Europe and in other places in the world, and now it seems like the Trump administration is going to try to embrace that here. And I'm sure, Greg, you heard about what the Trump administration just did, bombing that boat off the coast of Venezuela, I believe, and
Mm-hmm.
designating them terrorists, which is very much what you're saying. It's like geographically making the war on terror closer, and let alone the tactics being used, like which are torture under international law, just towards migrants here in the United States.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what's going on with my notifications, but yeah, I kind
It's
of,
okay.
oh my God damn it. Sorry.
It's all right.
Again,
Don't worry.
we're just kind of improvising here, you know,
It's
every
all
day with
good.
this flotilla. So, um, yeah, I kind of warned about this, you know, about the law of land warfare back in like November 2023 when they first bombed Al Shifa Hospital. It's like warfare is kind of like lawfare. It's you need to be really conscious about like what precedents you set and don't set. So now we've set the state bombing of hospitals. Now we have the rampant, just willy-nilly, ad hoc designation of different groups as terrorists. So, but that doesn't mean you can't necessarily do anything. But now a precedent has been set, like if you have the power, you can do anything with impunity. And of course, you could do that before, but there were norms. There was an interest in maintaining soft power, U.S. soft power around the globe. You know, there used to be a buildup during the Iraq War of manufacturing consent for what we're doing, but now apparently we're just going to war with Venezuela. And most people
Right.
don't understand why. And I think people need to be really concerned when, we, you know, carry out like summary executions on drug traffickers. Even if they provided no evidence that, who they were targeting. Usually when I grew up in special operations, if there was a high value target that, was detained or killed in an operation, it was published. Not a lot of media picked it up, but that was open source. You could access it. The days of that happening are over. So it's just like whatever the government says. All these people are like Tren de Aragua guys that are waging a war on drugs against America. Well, how soon before that turns inward on American citizens? When do the drone strikes on Americans or people inside the continental United States who are Tren de Aragua or MS-13 begin? So again, that's why we're on this boat, because it gives us a platform to actually like talk about it from a veteran's perspective, and it kind of gets like your problematic uncle a little bit more on board with these ideas.
Is that the function you're serving here, right? You can wave the veteran card and then say "Free Palestine" in the same sentence. That works great.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do get accused of stolen valor, so we're all publishing our DD-214s if we have to. Which
They seem to throw that around quite a bit, but back to the flotilla here. We kind of glossed over it, but I mean, I know, of course, you're prepared for detention by the Israeli government, but how are you prepared for that? Given the threats that Ben-Gvir is issuing, what is basically the consensus among maybe your veteran boat, but also the broader flotilla from Greta Thunberg all the way to Greg Stoker?
Well, if they want to, throw a bunch of U.S. veterans doing a action protected by international law into a terror dungeon, all who were honorably discharged from military service, they're fine to deal with that blowback. And, we have systems and support groups in place to blow up our representatives and parallel actions plans. So this is actually a much larger effort than just the boats. There's a lot of planning going in behind this that redounds back to the continental United States and each and every one of those 40 countries that is sending a boat and a delegation.
Were you in communication with the U.S. government at all about your plans in order to have some sort of protection if Israel tries to attack?
Well, I mean, we're eventually going to reach out to the State Department, let them know, that we're out
Right.
there. But again, who's going to be handling our case? Mike
Exactly.
Huckabee.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know that, for example, Greta was in communication with the Swedish government, but it just is, it just underscores what you're doing, that even without an administration that is probably going to heed your call or listen, that this is still something that you guys feel is important, especially with the strength and numbers piece. I mean, this is so much larger than previous efforts, given Israel's limited capacity on the water. It's a little bit more promising, at least, to overwhelm them a bit this time, maybe.
I mean, I'm prepared to have the whole thing get interdicted, but
Right.
Usually what they use for interdiction is their Syatet 13, which is like their Temu version of Navy SEALs, their Naval Special Operations Unit. And they're very small. There aren't a lot of them. So generally what's been happening is they've been sending like a security team to take control of the boats, and then steer them under arms into Ashdod or Haifa. But we have so many vessels, and if we manage to make it there on time, yeah, who knows how they're going to react. And there is actually aid in this convoy. It's not just a PR clout stunt. So, and there are also plans for distributing it and establishing a humanitarian corridor for future flotillas and establishing the precedent that it can be done.
Is that and when you talk about your mission here, the breaking of the siege and the escalation of breaking the siege with these flotillas continuously coming, being unrelenting and growing in the movement, is that just as important as the work of hopefully trying to get aid, or even I know that you're likely going to get intercepted, but just continuing to put pressure on in this way feels like that is just as important as anything, really.
Yeah, it's also we're in an information war for the existential survival of the people of Gaza, and there's really no way that they can sugarcoat blocking this aid. So that's another pressure point as well that we fully intend to exploit because it's completely inexcusable. Again, I refuse to exist in a world where we can watch the annihilation of an entire population and just hang out at brunch and try to pretend like everything's fine and like this isn't eventually going to affect me and everybody I care about eventually.
Exactly. And before I let you go, Greg, just your overall assessment of where we are in the movement for a liberated and free Palestine. And your show has been great and focused on this, laser focused on this from the beginning, Colonial Outcast. But we talked about this last time. And perhaps we haven't spoken since, say, like Iran responded and hit Israel in ways that are more severe than their advertising. But I think we did had at one point speak about how Hezbollah had been successful in fighting Israel in southern Lebanon, but then they took a significant blow. It appears like Israel's, military power reasserted itself, but also got into a defensive crouch because of Iran's success. So I'm curious what you feel like from the outside is like your view of Israel's, strength outside of how it's trying to present itself in terms of deterrence.
Well, they can never reestablish their deterrence because that means they would have to achieve a military victory over Hamas or Hezbollah, or Iran, which none of which is possible.
Right.
They're making efforts to disarm Hezbollah through political machinations in Lebanon, but that's not a military victory. That's not something that's going to deter further aggression, future aggression. Obviously, their own senior disaffected commanders have told publications like Haaretz and Mariv and Ynet News that the war in Gaza, as the strategic goals are stated, is unwinnable. So yeah, but in terms, deterrence can't be reestablished. Their edifice, their multi-generational edifice of propaganda and influence within the U.S. government is shattered forever. Even though like AIPAC still has control in some ways and influence, like it's out of the darkness and it can't last forever now. And so, in terms of the Palestine movement, there just aren't enough of it of us. So we're trying to preach a doctrine of intersectionality. So this is why I bring in ICE, ICE abolition, prison abolition, environmentalism. All of these things intersect with Palestine. Because it's like the linchpin. It's the linchpin of U.S. imperialism and capitalism.
I think I said it to a friend recently talking about it. It sounds a little corny, but Palestine is the heart of the world right now. And it is the world right now as far as I'm concerned. And truly, lastly, a little bit more specific on this, the IDF, the calls for reservists. From Netanyahu. I'm curious about your assessment about this because some apparently just aren't showing up, and there's a lot of talk about fatigue within the IDF or depression because it's quite hard to carry out a genocide, thoughts and prayers. But it appears that they may not have the numbers for his Gaza City ground invasion plans, although the brutality there from the air is still absolutely horrific.
Yeah, of course, but there's not really much left to bomb except the people themselves. Yeah, a ground offensive would take a lot of men. It would be really grueling. And a lot of these people don't want to be mobilized. That wasn't the deal when they thought when they had to go into the Israeli military. They're going to do 2 years, get out as a specialist, and then go work a tech job in Tel Aviv and live a nice life, like I don't know, doing whatever they do in Ibiza or some EDM festival. And like they literally didn't sign up for like a 4 or 5 year contract like professional militaries do. Like they weren't mentally prepared for this going into it. And now finally, I believe it was like last year, people were expecting like a higher suicide rate amongst like Israeli soldiers. And as a veteran who like is kind of like active within like veteran suicide circles, it's like that doesn't really happen immediately. You need to give it time to be like to see these guys being unable to reintegrate back into society after what they've done, unable to hold a job, be in a relationship, like these kind of things have to happen, and that takes time. So not only are reservists not going to be showing up as in the same numbers as they were, but they're going to deal with like a massive suicide rate. And that's only going to get worse the more time that these guys are separated from what they've done or what happened in Gaza in their time in service.
Well, I really appreciate your time today, Greg, from the flotilla, the Global Sumud Flotilla, sailing to Gaza to break the siege. Everyone can check out Colonial Outcasts. I saw you did a podcast from the flotilla as well, so committed to the game.
Yeah, just to make sure that this would work.
Exactly. It gave me a lot of confidence, but I'm so glad to be able to speak with you, and please stay safe. And love and solidarity to everyone on the boats with you. Appreciate you.
All right, thanks for having me on. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.